Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Forton for Michigan Matters. Today is Wednesday. It is the 28th of January. We've got a special guest here today. We're very fortunate to have him. There's nothing more important in Michigan, in my opinion, although I could make a big list of important stuff, is the integrity of our elections. Personally, I believe our elections are corrupt. And there's a guy here that's been working on it a long time with others. We have Patrick Colbeck with us, and he has got his latest book out. I have to be honest and have not read it yet, although I intend to. And one person I know that did read it, they said it's phenomenal, tons of great information. He also is the author of this 50-some page, January 2026, The Security of Electronic Voting Systems in the U.S. So I'd like to welcome Patrick and thank him for being here with us. And we're going to have a conversation about the 2026 election, elections in general, or whatever. So welcome, Patrick.
Hey, Mark, you're spot on with the assertion that the elections are the most important things we got out there, because without the elections, we don't have a voice. I mean, that's the voice of the people. You can't, whatever your policy issue, whether it's stopping abortions, whether it's fiscal responsibility, whether or not it's the border crisis, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Your voice is just whistling in the wind unless you are able to convert that voice into a vote, and that's via the election system. So it is extremely important. There's a lot of other things I'd rather be doing with my life right now besides investigating elections and making sure that we have as much integrity in elections as possible. So trust me, I would like to move on to another topic, but we can't do it until we secure the elections. And unfortunately, we're living in Michigan right now, and our elections are not secure as long as Jocelyn Benson's heading up the Secretary of State's office.
Yes, I agree. And I think the situation, I've always thought of Michigan as a uniparty. You know, I first got involved in 1986 as a precinct delegate, so this is my 40th year. And I've been watching our state circle the drain for 40 years. It seems as though nothing happens, even when Republicans are in power. And things don't really get fixed. You know, when the Democrats are in power, they're moving the football forward all the time. But anyway, I'm very concerned about our elections, and especially the 2026 election. So how do you feel about the 2026 election? Do you think we've gained much at all?
In Michigan, I think it's the only thing in our favor is that more people are paying attention. And I think there's going to be a lot of folks, particularly who support President Trump, like myself, that are going to get out and vote. And so I think there's a lot of people motivated to get out there. I think there's a lot of bad guys motivated as well, but most of them have fake aliases and fake names. So, and some of them are dead, but they're dedicated. They want to get out and vote too. So that's what we're dealing with. And Jocelyn Benson, just so we know, everybody knows what we're up against here. As Secretary of State, she's been found by over 7 courts to have issued unlawful guidance regarding our election. 7 courts. I mean, that's not just me saying she's, a bad Secretary of State. That's 7 unique courts. And then also, I want to point out that her own attorney, Heather Meingas, during testimony before the Michigan Court of Appeals, asserted that Benson only follows the laws that she agrees with, and if you don't like that, you can sue her. And so that's how she got those 7 court decisions, because people had to end up suing her. And I don't know about you, Mark, but I don't have a bottomless pit of money to go off and throw out at lawsuits and pay lawyers. They know that. They take advantage of it. And that's why she has the brazen attitude to sit there and say, go ahead and sue me, because she knows that the system, frankly, even in judiciary, as we're seeing nationwide, there's some issues with the integrity of the judiciary, and in particular in Michigan, where we've got a pretty good paper trail here with Jocelyn Benson providing an $82,500 quote unquote donation. Some would call it a bribe to Justice Kyra H. Bolden, who serves on the Michigan Supreme Court. At the same time, Benson had an appeal before the court where she was a defendant. And Benson had lost unanimously in all the lower court decisions. It was O'Halloran v. Benson. And she'd lost in the Court of Claims. She lost in the Court of Appeals 3-0. But magically, the Justice Bolden, who received the $82,500 donation from Jocelyn Benson, issued the majority opinion for the Michigan Supreme Court in favor of Jocelyn Benson after receipt of that $82,500 gift. That certainly looks like bribery to me. I filed complaints with the Attorney Grievance Commission, the Judicial Tenure Commission, Michigan Supreme Court, and since then, we've exhausted all state avenues, and I've handed it over to some folks in the federal government and the Department of Justice and the FBI to investigate. So hopefully, Jocelyn Benson will be held accountable. She's literally one of the most crooked secretaries of state that I've ever seen. And nationwide, I rank her right up there with Jenna Griswold and Katie Hobbs.
Wow. So something I've been hearing a lot of is that she has actually tampered with extremely the voter files and all that sort of the voter ID numbers. We all have a number. I've heard that that's been fooled with, that a whole lot of how do we, if she's destroyed things, how do we get it back the way it was what I'm trying to say.
Well, I mean, DOJ's filed a lawsuit against her for some data that'll expose everything that she's done. So Harmeet Dillon with the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice, I mean, has in accordance with the Help America Vote Act, Help America Vote Act gave out a bunch of free money to, quote unquote, free money to the states to implement these electronic voting systems. When they did that, they agreed to a certain set of conditions, and Harmeet Dillon with this lawsuit is just making sure that they've complied with those conditions. And organizations like Michigan Fair Elections have done an exceptional job at auditing compliance with HAVA, and it's clear they haven't met the conditions. So I'm hoping that will lead to some penalties. But the wheels of justice move very, very slow, at least for us. They move very, very quickly for the bad guys. They move very, very slow for us.
Yes, it does. This election, 2026, there's 3 candidates running for Secretary of State.
Yeah.
Do you have one that you think would be the most amiable towards straightening this out, with really intending to straighten it out and realizing that our elections are probably the most important issue in the race?
Absolutely. And, I talked to all 3 of those candidates and kept my powder dry up until recently. And I was hearing statements being made by one of the candidates that frankly gave a false sense of security regarding what he has done as a county clerk. And I'm referring to Anthony Ferlini out in Macomb County. And for most people, I mean, Tony's very good at the first peel of the onion layer and talking and schmoozing people and getting people to believe that he's doing the right thing. But I've been at this election integrity stuff for quite some time. And when you peel back the onion layers and go to layers 2 and 3, you find out that what he's pushing, what he's peddling is not necessarily true. And in particular, he talks about this full forensic audit, or this forensic audit that he did of Macomb County. And I would submit that from what I've seen so far, it's just a bunch of window dressing. It's a dog and pony show, because it's not a full scope forensic audit where you go off and evaluate all the election returns. He brought in probably one of the best cybersecurity experts in the country and essentially turned him into a spectator during the audit and didn't allow him to direct any activities or conduct any activities himself with the electronic voting systems, which indicates to me that it was intended as a dog and pony show since the beginning, and just so he could put out the name of this great expert, which is Ben Cotton, by the way, the guy. He heads up an organization called Cypher. He really knows his stuff. And in this case, it was evident that he didn't do it. So he talks about this report. He put out a public report, and it moved. So I got into a little bit of a rigmarole when I said, hey, he took it down, and it's just that he moved the link on his website or whatever. So I found it again. It's up there, but there was 2 different versions of the report. One is the public report. It's like an executive summary. But I got a little bit of a technical background. I'm a certified Microsoft small business specialist. I've been digging in on these electronic voting systems for the last 5 years in detail. I wanted to see a document that was referenced in that little dog and pony report, the executive report, called the Detailed Technical Report. And when Tony called me and he was ostensibly asking for my endorsement at the time, and I said, well, before I could consider that, I'd like to see that detailed technical report that you reference in your executive summary. And he said, that doesn't exist. There is no detailed technical report. I go, it's referenced in your own audit report. You can't tell me it doesn't exist. I mean, or was the report wrong? And so I submitted a FOIA request for it, and got a response back on the FOIA request that said that due to security issues, we are not allowed to release this report to you. And I go, mind you, this is for an audit that was done 5 years earlier. So if there's security issues, that indicates that security settings for this equipment has not changed in 5 years, which raises a whole bunch of new security issues from my perspective. So it kind of reeks to high heaven of a dog and pony show, and I'm tired of people, trying to put lipstick on a pig. Our elections right now are in a sad state of affairs. He was in a position to actually do something and didn't, and it's very frustrating to me. So yeah, and so that's the who I don't want to get anywhere near the Secretary of State's office. So one I am supporting to get in there is somebody I think is a take charge leader. And I sat back for a while because I wanted to see what she was going to talk about on the campaign trail, how she was going to present herself. Same thing with one of the other candidates too. So both of them, I wanted to hear them out and have them make their case. And ultimately, I got together with Sheriff Darleaf, who's arguably the only law enforcement officer in the state that's going off and pursuing election integrity investigations. And we can do a whole chapter on his efforts because he's been doing a great job on that. Both of us have endorsed Monica Yatuma for Secretary of State. She's got the right attitude. She's got the management skills, the leadership skills. And I think she's going to do very, very well in that position. So that's who I'm supporting.
I think you're right. And then, and also I've heard criticisms like, oh, never done it, don't have experience, blah, blah, blah. Well, in my mind, 4 years ago, Mr. Ferlini was elected clerk in Macomb County. He's a lifetime politician. He didn't know how to run the clerk's office. There's already a staff there that knows how to do deeds and death certificates and all that they do. It's a functioning office. All you have to be is honest, a good manager,
Exactly.
and that type of thing. You don't have to be an expert on license plates. So that is an argument.
By the way, thanks for reminding me, because 4 years ago, I was in Tony's office with you, with Lisa Mankiewicz, with Jackie Eubanks, who presented data around canvassing.
Real evidence.
Yeah, I mean, so we provided actual evidence to Tony Ferlini of illegal votes being cast in Macomb County during the 2020 election. And you remember, we sat down with him. He had his election deputy with him at the time. And we gave him one name. He looked it up in the computer and said, yeah, what you're identifying is a problem. It indicates a likely illegal vote. And then we entered in another name, said, oh, yep, what you see is a problem. That's likely 2 illegal votes. And then when they were typing in the third one, remember what happened?
Yep. Go ahead.
The internet went down.
That's right.
So, oops, can't look up anymore. And I don't know about you. I didn't hear boo about that afterwards. He said, oh, I'll go off and look into it. Next thing I know is Jackie Eubanks is getting investigated by law enforcement, not these individuals who cast illegal votes. So, sorry, Tony.
Voter intimidation. That's right. They question her, family members, friends, and everything for voter intimidation.
Yes.
And you're looking at somebody, I think I mentioned how I started 1986, 40 years.
Yeah.
When you and I sat in the office, what was that, 4 years ago? About. So that's 36 years.
So it's maybe 5 years ago.
Okay. So that's 35 years of experience. And this dumbbell had no sense to get up, excuse me, I have to go to the restroom, and walk out into the main office and ask the people, how's your internet working?
Yeah.
I thought of that.
Yeah, what's most frustrating is that we actually had a Republican in as Macomb County prosecutor. So it was one of those 1-2 combos that we don't really have anywhere else in the state. And it could have resulted in some prosecutions and investigation into what happened in 2020. By the way, the report that Jackie put out there indicated that there was a 17.6% anomaly rate in Macomb County. That was more than sufficient to go off and overcome the quote unquote 154,188 reported vote margin for president in the 2020 election. So
yeah, absolutely.
This is not a trivial exercise. And so, nope,
Yeah.
sorry, a non-starter there. But the bottom line is we got a good candidate in Monica. I think she's going to do exceedingly well. And also, I want to point out, Secretary of State is bigger than the elections. So they've got, I mean, it's essentially the customer service branch for all of our state. And I'll tell you, Monica knows how to get things done. I mean, she really is a leader. So I'm pretty encouraged. She spins up on things so quickly. And that's why I waited to see how she do on the campaign trail. And she's pretty darn sharp.
She is. She's very smart. There was something else I wanted to ask you about. The Secretary of State, they hire Director of Elections. Am I saying it right?
Yeah, Michigan Bureau of Elections Director.
That's right.
Jonathan Brader is our current one, and former chairperson of ERIC, which is another.
Yes, that's right. We got to get out of that. So, but that's very critical. And maybe we should ask people on the campaign trail, the candidates, who they would intend or consider hiring for that position.
Yeah.
Because I think a uniparty individual, a uniparty, the way Michigan has been, I wouldn't be surprised if they hired Brader all over again because his experience.
Yeah, I could see that happen as well. Yeah, it's discouraging, but we'll see where things pan out, and we got a lot of room for improvement in Michigan. So,
Amen.
If you're not afraid of hard work, this is the place to be.
Amen. Isn't that the truth? So anyway, I'd like to just briefly, if you want to say something about your book and about the report that you did.
Okay.
I printed this up, but I only got to like 3 or 4 pages after I was busy today. Today I had the commitments I had to take care of. But anyway, is there anything you want to explain to people about that? We could send this to people and that kind of thing.
In the wake of the 2020 election, and viewing what was happening with Sidney Powell and a lot of the election lawsuits that were happening all across the country and how they were getting stonewalled, I said we gotta do something from a messaging perspective to get the word out about what is happening here. It was becoming obvious to me and many other what I call meddling kids. I mean, those are the folks investigating election fraud all across the country. I'm not alone in that regard. And I said we need to go off and win the messaging war, because you need to win in the court of public opinion nowadays before you can ever hope to win in the court of law, because Lady Justice's blindfold is off. You can see that most recently with the dismissal of the James Comey indictment and Letitia James on technicalities. You can see it in the fact that whenever we talk about election fraud lawsuits, they say, oh, no, that was decided in over 60 cases. And you actually look in the details of them. Most of them, at least 30 out of the 64 were dismissed on standing. They said, no, we're not even going to look at this because you don't have standing. That's why that recent Bose versus Illinois Supreme Court decision was so important, because that puts the kibosh on that going forward. All the rest of them, there were zero jury trials actually looking at evidence and doing cross-examinations. They were all decided from the bench. And I can tell you, in Michigan, we had all the lawsuits directed to somebody that I question the integrity of significantly, and that's Judge Timothy Kenney. He routed all the election lawsuits to him, and all of them got decided in favor of Benson and crew. And then he retired right after he did that. So no, there's a lot of bad mojo going on in the Motor City. So and in Southeast Michigan in particular. So that book came out of my attempt to get the word out. Originally, that was the script of a documentary I was putting together, because I wanted to go off and make a film. Then I realized that my filmmaking talents were lacking, and finally said, all right, I'm just going to convert this into a book, and got that out there in 2001 timeframe. And just my goal was just to help us win the messaging war. And and get that out to everybody. And
Mhm.
so one thing that's clear is that from the beginning, all of us meddling kids, we were outsiders attempting to look in. And anytime somebody peeked behind the curtain of the Wizard of Oz and tried to see how the machines were manipulating votes, tried to get into the details of
Mhm.
what was going on with things like public accuracy tests, or the fact that these machines were connected to the internet, or the manipulation of our voter rolls, what
Yep.
happened? Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson would go off and get her minions out there and start attacking that person. And other organizations were involved in the lawfare as well. So they were trying to make sure that we could not peek behind the curtain. And I'll tell you, which gets to the heart of what I believe is a one-word solution to election integrity, and that is transparency. If I can't see how the meal is made, I'm not going to eat it. And that's what's happening right now in Michigan, is that they are pushing use via the use of NGOs, via the use of bogus security concerns and all this other, and via the constraints that Michigan has put in the contracts with the electronic voting system vendors, which I would submit are called illusory provisions. They actually are designed to prevent a determination of whether or not the vendor is compliant with the contract.
Mhm.
It's there's a lot of problems in that, but they can all be solved with transparency, and that's one of the things that Monica Utuma really gets, is that transparency is the key to
Yes.
exposing what's going on with
Well,
the elections.
actually, that was mentioned also by Mr. Ferlini. They had just in Macomb County, they
Yeah.
just had a Secretary of State uh, forum,
Yep.
and the moderators were Senator Ruth Johnson
Yeah.
and Macomb County Drain Commissioner uh, Candace Miller, both of whom, as you know, were Secretary of States. They were the moderators. And Ferlini mentioned transparency over and over again. Today, I looked up on the clerk's website to look up precinct delegates because, as you know, conventions are coming up in the Republican Party. And I looked up on the clerk's website, I want to start calling delegates, right? All the phone numbers and email addresses of the delegates are no longer on the Macomb County website.
Well,
So,
I'll do you one better on the lack of transparency coming out of Mr. Ferlini. So remember that detailed technical report that I was talking about, and
yeah,
that his audit that he did, this quote unquote forensic audit that he conducted of Macomb in the wake of the 2020 election. It was in the wake of that, the generation of that report. He actually reached out, or his office, with him copied on it, reached out to Jocelyn Benson, Miss Serial Lawbreaker, and said, "Hey, Jocelyn, how can we prevent the disclosure of the details of the records behind this audit?" So he actually did premeditated FOIA obstruction and said, "How can we prevent the disclosure of this information to people that are going to seek it via the FOIA process?" And guess what? When he denied my FOIA, which was like over 4 years later, he used the exact same language that was recommended, not by Jocelyn Benson's group, by the way. Jocelyn punted. She actually let the machine vendor, in this case ES&S, actually provide the language necessary to prevent disclosure of this information. So no, that is the exact opposite of transparency. That is premeditated FOIA obstruction.
it is. It absolutely is. Now, correct me too if I'm wrong, because these things I've heard over the years that these machines really came out of Venezuela.
Yeah, so here's the whole history of it. And by the way, I saw you pop up the link to the Election Crime Bureau. I'm currently serving as the COO of Lindell Management, and as part of those duties, I curate a website called electioncrimebureau.com. And on that page, you can get access to a lot of information, including details on Venezuela and their role in U.S. elections that you probably have not heard anywhere else. And it gets to the heart of what you just talked about. There's strong evidence and lots of testimonies from a lot of senior officials from Venezuela that assert the fact that Venezuela was the one responsible for developing a software company called Smartmatic. And the purpose of the software that was being developed out of there is to manipulate the results of election and keep Hugo Chavez at the time in power. And so essentially, Venezuela was a narco state, and to a certain extent it still is today, but the head of that snake is in U.S. custody, Nicolas Maduro. But what they did is they were not only trafficking drugs, they were not only engaged in human trafficking, they decided to branch out into another form of business called election theft. And so they actually engaged in this theft in, I think it was 72 different countries. They use these tools essentially to use democracy to subvert democracy. So they use democratic processes to overturn some of the democracies, in particular in South America. They had a dream, and Hugo Chavez was pretty clear about this. He had a dream that he was going to be able to pick the next United States president. And so I can tell you that in 2020, the Iranian foreign minister, who was a strategic partner with Venezuela, was invited to Caracas, Venezuela, to watch the 2020 election returns in the United States, because they believe that they finally had the opportunity to go off and choose the next president. And that's exactly what they did in 2020. So you guys know, Smartmatic in the 2020 election was only used as an independent company in LA County, California, which is also famous for the Eugene Yu, from the former Koenig CEO, being indicted for theft of U.S. election information and transporting it over to China. That was Catherine Engelbrecht and True the Vote, and those guys uncovered that information. So that's where Smartmatic was based in 2020. But Smartmatic bone is connected to the Sequoia bone, because Smartmatic ended up buying Sequoia in 2004, I think it was. And it was a big issue. Democrats had an issue with this. It was a Congressman Maloney from New York said that deserves a CFIUS investigation, which is a foreign influence.
I remember that.
Yeah, and so Lou Dobbs at the time on CNN was all over it. You can see 2006, he had broadcast after broadcast with Kitty Pilgrim saying, "Why is a foreign government software company purchasing an election system in the U.S.?" And we know from court documents and other materials, due to the investigators, Martin Rodell and Gary Bernson, who's an ex-CIA station chief out in Bolivia, they actually recruited a bunch of whistleblowers. And we know that the Smartmatic software that was developed to steal elections found its way into Sequoia voting systems in the U.S., which is who Smartmatic purchased. And then we find out that after this whole CFIUS investigation got conducted, they were forced to divest themselves of Sequoia, and in came this company called Dominion. And they purchased all the Sequoia assets, which were derived from the Smartmatic assets. So all that information and more is up in this library, up on at the Election Crime Bureau. And I just encourage people to go up and read it, because odds are you're not hearing about this on it. You're not going to hear this on Fox News. You're definitely not going to hear it on CNN or MS Now or whatever the heck they're calling themselves now. But all this is from signed affidavits from senior officials. I mean, one of the officials is the former head of security for Hugo Chavez for 14 years. We've got a senior election official that was setting up the war rooms for the Venezuelan election system, talking about how elections were stolen. You've got the three-star General Barrios, who is testifying to how elections were stolen, and then another four-star general, I think it was General Cordonez, that was testifying to this as well. And I'm sure Maduro is singing that tune right now too, in captivity, and providing a lot of information for investigators. So no, you're right. The Smartmatic bone is connected to Venezuela, and the Smartmatic bone is connected to Sequoia, which is connected to Dominion, which is now rebranded as Liberty Vote. And so every time you get close, what do? They change the name. And that's what's happening here. And the machines are bad mojo. They got to go, which gets to that other report that you were holding up. So there's that EAC report on the security elections. As a result of the Help America Vote Act, an organization called the Election Assistance Commission was put in place with the task and the mission to secure the electronic voting systems that we use in America. And currently, the EAC is chaired by a gentleman by the name of Donald Palmer, and he's a Republican. He's a Republican appointee. And he made a statement. I'm involved in a lot of different election integrity networks all across the country. And he made a statement to these experts that asserted that there's nothing to see here. The election systems are secure. We check the source code. We do penetration testing. We do all this good stuff. And so there's nothing for anybody to worry about. And I believe, just like Forlini saying that he did his forensic audit, I believe that gave a false sense of security to the general American public. And so I went in and did a deep dive on his statements and compared what he was saying with the security provisions you would normally put in place for a critical system. And just for background, I'm very familiar with critical systems. I used to be a senior design engineer for Boeing, working on the International Space Station. I was responsible for elements of the life support system. The astronauts tended to think of that as a critical system. So it could not fail, and you couldn't call Amazon to sit parts or FedEx it up there or anything else. It had to work, and it had to be reliable. And it's the same thing with our election systems. If they're undermined, if they're subverted, if the integrity of our elections goes foobar, then we're in trouble as a country. And so I just went through and analyzed a statement made by the EAC chair against what you would consider a reasonable approach to secure this critical infrastructure system. And it's all window dressing. It's all dog and pony show, just like what Forlini did. The code base, and the examination of the code, you can tell that's not thorough. The requirements associated with the design of the systems it's not indicating the rigor you'd want in regards to a critical system. They didn't have sufficient rigor in the configuration management, which means tracing the whole deployment of these so-called trusted build configurations out to the field and then adequately secured during the configuration process. They never did what we used to do on a critical system called a failure modes and effects analysis, where you break it down component by component, software module by software module, and say, all right, what happens if this goes wrong? How do you mitigate it going wrong? And so never any of that type of discipline. And then last but not least, we looked at the supply chain security. And a lot of people don't know this, but right now it's illegal for us to use components from China in critical systems in the United States due to fiscal year 19 National Defense Authorization Act provision, Section 889. I think it's 889. But in that provision, it prohibits the use of federal funds to procure systems that are manufactured by our foreign adversaries like China. And the fact of the matter is, Dominion, we got internal emails from them, thanks in large part to the efforts of Sheriff Dar Leaf out in Berry County and his investigations and his working with Attorney Stephanie Lambert and Patrick Byrne. We know that 48% of the components for Dominion's ImageCast precinct system that's found in every single system in every single county where Dominion's been deployed in the state, this system, 48% of the components come from Communist China. And those systems should never have been deployed according to federal law. So, and by the way, when you say, well, the feds didn't procure them, oh, well, Fed dollars were used in the form of these HAVA grants that Harmeet Dillon is ensuring they comply with the stipulations around it. Well, one of the stipulations is these aren't supposed to be, featuring these components from foreign adversaries. So yeah, so I put together a pretty detailed report on that. I got it out to as many people as possible. You can get a copy of that report up on the electioncrimebureau.com website as well. It's one of the posts up there on the security of U.S. elections.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm going to try to see if it's all right to put a link on our website to it. Would that be all right?
Yeah, that's fine. It's
a link to your site. Okay.
Yeah. It's it's up there. You have to surf through it, but
okay. Now.
So anyway, machines are bad. We need to get rid of them. We don't have election security until we get rid of them.
Amen.
And for that one core reason, that one word solution, which is transparency. I can't peek behind the curtain of what goes on inside these machines. If you do, you get arrested, you get indicted.
That's right.
Stephanie Lambert,
Yeah.
clerk Stephanie Scott out in Hillsdale, Matt DePernal, all these guys have found out that if you attempt to go off and find out how our elections are being conducted, you will get indicted under this current regime in Michigan with Dana Nessel at the helm of the Attorney General's office.
Yeah, it's terrible. So now excuse me, so you will be at the Michigan Matters office on the Monday the 9th.
Yeah.
And at 7 o'clock. This is your meeting. We want to know as much as we can about the upcoming election, about the things we talked about now and everything. And we're going to get the word out on this. And we should have a full room, probably about 80, 90 people, I think, is about all we can handle. But anybody watching this who would like to meet Pat and talk personally about all this, because it's important. And there's a whole lot more. It's our Republicans that brought these machines to Michigan. Is it not?
Yeah, and we're dealing with people like Ann Delisle. You know, I was on this phone conversation inside the Michigan GOP, and I was highlighting some of the same concerns I just shared with you and why we can't trust the integrity of these electronic voting systems. And she essentially tried to shout me down during the whole meeting to these folks that were deciding a policy on whether or not to continue with these machines or return to hand counts. And so there is this. It's very weird because these people popped out of nowhere. I don't even know where these people came from, frankly, and have been pushing for the use of these machines against all rationale. And so it's kind of concerning to me. We know how to do hand counts, at least before Common Core math standards got out there. We used to be able to count.
Amen.
And so we need to return back to that. Is that perfect? No, but it removes quite a few of the variables that can be manipulated by those intent on stealing elections. And by the way, it also makes it very easy to scale that fraud without adding an army of co-conspirators. So it's when you have networked electronic voting systems, all you need is one guy with an IV drip of Red Bull, based in the basement of his mom and dad out in Beijing, China, and you can steal a U.S. election.
Amen. That's right. And we know one candidate who defends the machines to the death, and we need that. We have to get rid of these machines. We must get rid of the machines and mail-in ballots too. Actually, if we could do those two things, it would change everything.
Yeah, I think you're going to see some executive orders and some other developments coming out of D.C. on that front here shortly. So it's got to happen soon, or else we're in trouble going into 2026.
I want to thank you, Patrick, for taking the time to be with us today. And I'm asking people watching this to, what do they say, like it and subscribe, stuff like that, and spread this around the state. The delegates of Michigan, they got to hear this. It's critical because in just a few weeks, they're going to be deciding who the Republican nominee will be for Secretary of State. And if we want to change Michigan, the only way to do it, because we're a mess, and the only way to do it is to clean up these elections.
And by the way, if you're a detractor listening to this and you think everything that I'm talking about is a bunch of hooey, come on down. Let's have a discussion on it. Yeah. Unlike other folks, I'm not shy about having these discussions. As long as you're professional and polite, let's have a discussion on it, because I've been investigating this stuff for over 5 years. And if the evidence that I'm looking at is wrong, I'd love to hear other evidence to the contrary that disproves it. But every single time I ask for evidence in support of people's assertions that this is all a bunch of hooey and they try to disparage me and do all the usual character assassination stuff, they never, ever provide any evidence in support of their assertions.
No, they don't.
And I say, just bring it. Bring your evidence here. And by the way, a report from Jocelyn Benson doesn't count. So, because she's already on record as lying. So, guys, just bring it. Let's have a discussion, and we'll see how things go. But February 9th, look forward to having a frank conversation. I'll bring copies of the books if you want them. But this may surprise you, Mark. But I'm gonna say that if you only have time to read one book on election integrity, don't read my book. Read the book called "Stolen Elections" by Ralph Pizzullo. That'll get you caught up on why the operation in Venezuela happened. It's not
Okay.
about taking out cigar boats full of drugs, guys. It's much
Yeah.
deeper than that, and it's about people that are trying to steal our elections and steal, frankly, the governments and democracies all over the world. And that book by Ralph Pizzullo is a must read. So it's called Stolen Elections, and I stand by everything in my book. It's all straightforward. It's very informative. It's got good evidence, and all the assertions that I made in that book have stood the test of time. So it's not like I don't appreciate what I did in there with imperfect access to information at the time, but the Ralph Pizzullo guys, these guys actually recruited dozens of whistleblowers that were actually engaged in the fraud, familiar with the fraud, and they provide some unique insights that more and more people need to know about. So share that information.
Sounds good. And also one last thing on my part, since 2020, we all knew that election was stolen. We knew it. And as you know, we were early meetings with the Macomb County clerk and all. But at that time, I was chairman of the Macomb County Republican Party, and my vice chair, Lisa, and we went after the chairmanship and vice chairmanship of the Macomb County, the Michigan MIGOP. In so doing, we were all over the state. And everywhere we went, I would start off by asking, who in your heart of hearts, and some were big meetings, one meeting was 3 ladies up north in the upper, but everywhere we went, asked the same question. Who in your heart of hearts know that Donald Trump won this election? And everybody always raised their hands, except when we did one in Macomb County.
Yeah.
Okay, the establishment crowd didn't. But everywhere we went, they did. And also, every elected official we talked to during that time, every one of them, nothing wrong with our elections. So that they're totally off from the people. They believe, and probably still do, there's nothing wrong with our elections. And yet the people know there is. So this video is very important, and I hope people share it. And we're going to do all we can to get the word out. And because we must save, Michigan is a mess. We got to save it.
Yeah, by the way, when you see some of these other candidates on the campaign trail, ask them all, do you think the 2020 election was stolen or not? And see what their answers are. I think that's a good way of separating the sheep from the goats.
Amen. Thanks again, Patrick. Appreciate it. See you soon, man.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, you take care. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here.